Okay, hi class. Most people's first attempts at the lab report was good. However, there's some areas that could be improved upon. What I'm going to do is go through each of the sections of the report, note some common mistakes, and give you some tips for making your report look great. Please make sure that you read your task sheet, as you'll not be completing each section correctly if you don't. There's instructions under each heading to help you complete these sections. Okay, some general advice for formatting. Please make sure that your font is size 11 or size 12. Make sure there's no bold unless it's a title, no italics in the text, and using capital letters and full stops, even if it's on a dot point. Okay, I'm going to run through each of these sections here and I'll just talk about them briefly. Okay, so make sure that you've got a suitable title such as expansion and contraction experiment. This should be centered and in larger font size than the main body of the text. For your background information section, what you can do is copy and paste straight from the task sheet, which I have written, and put that one in your assignment. So as you can see, the background information is just up here. For the aim, what I noticed is that people were too brief and not very specific. So in this you need to discuss what the purpose of the experiment was. A good place to start for that is by looking at what observations you noticed in your results table. The focus was to observe on the effect heating and cooling has on substances and also on expansion and contraction. Your aim should have something like this. Your hypothesis section, this is where you predict what's going to happen. Please always use third person. Don't use I in this section. Start by saying something like, in this experiment, the ... Don't be afraid to be detailed here. You need to talk about what should happen to the state of the substances and how this will affect expansion and contraction of the balloon. For the materials section, you need to make sure that this is a comprehensive list and include all the materials that you used. Please see my YouTube video to check if you have forgotten any. List these in dot points. Remember capital letters and full stops for these. Please do not write in italics for this section. It would also be great if you could include a copy of the diagram from the task, even if you cannot find a way to label it. Okay. Materials. Variables. This is a new section that we haven't talked much about. Variables are factors in an experiment which can either change, stay the same, or influence something in the experiment. A constant variable does not change throughout the practical. A dependent variable, it's something that you measure or observe during the experiment, and an independent variable is the one thing that changes in the experiment and affects something else. You need to think about what stayed the same in the experiment, what was measured or observed, and what changed to affect something else. Please come and see me if you're still not sure with how to identify what the variables were. What I'm going to talk about now is the safety considerations. For your safety considerations, please note the general considerations that need to be made. You don't need to be as detailed for this section. For example, you could say something like, follow the lab safety rules instead of stating every lab safety rule, like don't run in the lab, make sure you wear your lab coat. Write these in dot points. You want to state the safety consideration, why it is dangerous and what can be done to avoid this. Please make sure that you do that one. Okay, your results section, that's a pretty simple one. All you need to do for this section is include a copy of the table which you would have recorded some observations in, and paste that here. The discussion section was where most people struggled. I just wanted to talk about a few key points, but I don't want to go into each question because I don't want to give the answers away. I noticed that people were not answering the section where you needed to state an example of, for instance, a solid which turned to a liquid. You simply need to write down something like solid ice melted when heat was applied to it, turning it into a liquid. The other section I noticed a few people not hitting the mark was when you were required to talk about kinetic theory. So what kinetic theory is, is a way of describing how the vibration of particles can influence their state, movement, and arrangement. When particles are vibrating quickly, the bonds of the lattice are broken and they are moving freely. When this happens, it's a gas. When they're tightly packed in a formation of a lattice and the particles aren't vibrating very quickly, the substance is a solid. Please make sure that you see the slideshow up on Google Classrooms and do some extra research to help you answer these questions. It's very important that you show off your understanding in this area. The last point for the discussion, which I noticed, was the question which asks you to describe different outcomes for the heating part of the experiment. This is asking you to describe two ways in which heat affected the experiment, such as changing the state of matter or even contributing to expansion of the balloon. Please be descriptive in the discussion. Finally, the conclusion. In the conclusion, you need to state if your hypothesis was successful. You also need to discuss why it was a success and what made it a success. To do this, briefly summarize what happened and how this was linked to your hypothesis. Please make sure before you submit your assignment you proofread it by reading it aloud, getting someone else to check it, and making the changes necessary. I look forward to seeing how you go. Please make sure that you come and see me if you have any further questions.